My daughter came home from a family barbecue smiling. Then she whispered, "He said secrets make us special." I asked my husband one question. His face went. I was wiping sauce off the counter when she said it. I didn't grab her, even though my stomach dropped so hard it felt like something inside me had been cut loose. I turned slowly and asked, "Who said that, baby?" She shrugged like it was nothing. "Your cousin." She meant Troy. He wasn't really my cousin. He was Mason's cousin. But in that family, everyone was uncle, aunt, or cousin because it made everything sound warmer than it felt. I asked her what happened, keeping my voice soft. She said Troy gave her extra cookies from the cooler and told her not to tell Grandma because Grandma would say she'd had too much sugar. That was it. Cookies. One tiny secret. Nothing I could take to anybody and say, "This is proof." Nothing dramatic. Nothing obvious. Just a grown man telling my 5-year-old daughter that secrets made them special. And maybe some people would hear that and think I overreacted. But I had been watching Troy for years. He was the kind of man who never technically did enough for you to call him out without looking dramatic. Every time I pulled away from him, Diana noticed. Diana was Mason's mother, and she ran that family like her feelings were the law. She could say, "I'm disappointed," and full-grown adults would start apologizing before they even knew what they had done. Troy was her soft spot. The first time Troy hugged me too long, I stepped back and laughed awkwardly. Diana saw it. Later, while I was helping her carry paper plates to the patio, she said, "Troy has had a hard life. Don't make him feel unwanted." I remember looking at her, trying to figure out what I was supposed to say to that. I hadn't insulted him. I hadn't accused him. I had moved my own body away from his. But in Diana's house, boundaries were treated like cruelty. Mason told me the same thing when we got home. "He's awkward," he said. "He doesn't mean anything by it." I said, "Then why does he only seem awkward with women?" Mason sighed like I was trying to start a fight. He grew up differently. Mom kind of helped raise him. She's protective. That was always the answer. Troy had a hard life. Troy didn't mean it. Troy was misunderstood. Troy needed patience. So I learned to manage it. I kept Stella near me at gatherings. I didn't leave her in the yard unless another adult I trusted was outside. I made excuses to leave early. I smiled when I had to and watched him when nobody else did. But at that barbecue, I lost track of her for maybe 10 minutes. That's the part one kept replaying later. 10 minutes. I had been inside with Diana, rinsing a bowl in the sink while she complained that I never relaxed around the family. Mason was in the garage with Caleb and Alan. The kids were outside. There were at least 6 adults around. It should have been safe. Then my daughter came home and said secrets made people special. That night, after Stella fell asleep, I waited until Mason came out of the shower. He walked into our bedroom drying his hair, acting normal, and I said, "I don't want Troy around Stella anymore." He paused. Not confusion. Not concern. Annoyance. What happened now? That one word almost made me lose it. Now. Like I had a hobby of inventing problems with his family. I told him exactly what Stella said. I kept it calm. I didn't embellish. I didn't say Troy had done anything beyond what she told me. I said I was not comfortable with any adult teaching our daughter to keep secrets from us, even over something as small as cookies. Mason rubbed both hands over his face. "Leah, come on." That was when I knew the fight was coming. I said, "Don't come on me. She's 5. He gave her cookies. He told her not to tell. You're making it sound like something else. I'm saying it is inappropriate." He turned away from me, then turned back. "You've never liked him." "No, I haven't. So, this is about that. This is about our daughter." He lowered his voice like I was the unreasonable one. "You're making a serious implication over cookies." I said, "I'm making a parenting decision over a grown man asking a child to keep secrets." He said, "Troy isn't dangerous." I asked, "How do you know?" He didn't answer right away. It was only a second. Maybe less. But I saw it. His face changed. Not much. Just enough. A flicker. A door closing. I sat up straighter. "Mason," I said, "how do you know?" He snapped, "Because I know my family." I said, "That's not an answer." Then we had the worst fight of our marriage. He accused me of poisoning our daughter against his family. I accused him of ignoring every red flag because his mother trained him to. He said I was being cruel to someone who had never hurt me. I said Troy didn't need to hurt me personally for me to protect Stella. At one point he said, "You can't just ban people from family events because they make you uncomfortable." I said, "Watch me." He slept on the couch that night. The next morning, he made coffee like nothing happened. Stella ate cereal at the table, swinging her feet, completely unaware that our marriage had shifted under the floor. Mason kissed her head before work. He didn't kiss me. For 3 days, we barely spoke. We texted about groceries and school pickup. We moved around each other like roommates. I thought maybe he was cooling down. I thought maybe he would come to me and say, "Okay, I thought about it, and you're right. We should be careful." Instead, Diana called me. I was folding laundry on our bed when my phone rang. Her name on the screen made my whole body tense. I answered because I still had this stupid reflex to be polite. She didn't say hello. She said, I heard you're spreading ugly things about Troy. My hand tightened around a towel. I haven't spread anything. Then why is Mason upset? Because I told him I don't want Troy around Stella. Diana exhaled, slow and cold. You young mothers read too much online. Every man is a threat now. Every awkward comment is a crime. It's exhausting. I sat down on the edge of the bed. Diana, my daughter said Troy told her secrets make them special. He gave her cookies. That is not the part I'm worried about. Then what are you saying? I knew what she wanted. She wanted me to say something she could punish. Something she could repeat to everyone in that wounded voice of hers. Leah accused Troy of something disgusting. Leah is unstable. Leah hates this family. So I didn't give it to her. I said, I'm saying my child will not be taught to hide things from me. Diana's voice sharpened. This family has survived worse than your imagination. I went still. There are sentences people say by accident, and there are sentences that slip out because they've been living behind someone's teeth for years. That was the second kind. I said, what does that mean? She went quiet. Not confused quiet. Caught quiet. Then she said, don't start digging where you don't belong. And she hung up. I sat there for a long time with the towel still in my lap. I remember the dryer buzzing down the hall. I remember Stella laughing at a cartoon in the living room. I remember thinking, very clearly, something happened. Not maybe. Something happened and they knew. I didn't call Mason. I didn't call Diana back. I didn't text the family group chat. I sat there and thought about every weird moment I had filed away because everyone told me I was being too sensitive. Then I called Brooke. Brooke was Mason's sister. She lived in Savannah and rarely came home. Diana called her dramatic. Caleb called her difficult. Mason always said Brooke liked distance, as if she had randomly chosen to detach from the family that raised her. I had never been close to her, but I always liked her. She was blunt. She didn't perform happiness at family gatherings. She didn't laugh when Diana made little digs. She usually left before dessert. When she answered, she sounded surprised. Leah? I said, can I ask you something strange? She gave this tiny, humorless laugh. In this family? Sure. My mouth went dry. Is there something I should know about Troy? The line went silent. I thought the call dropped. I pulled the phone back to check, but it was still connected. Then Brooke said, very quietly, did something happen to Stella? I swear the room tilted. I stood up so fast the towel fell to the floor. No, I said. Not that I know of. But she came home saying something weird, and Diana just told me not to dig. Brooke made a sound I will never forget. Not crying at first. More like air leaving a body after years of holding it in. I said, Brooke. She whispered, I knew this would happen someday. I pressed the phone harder to my ear. What would happen? She didn't give me graphic details. I didn't ask for them. I wouldn't put them here even if she had. What she told me was enough. When she was 12, Troy was 17. Something happened that made her feel unsafe in her own family. She told Diana. Diana cried. Diana said Troy was damaged and confused, and that Brooke had to be careful how she talked about it because one accusation could ruin his life. Brooke said Diana made it sound like protecting Troy was the same thing as protecting the family. Then Diana sent Brooke to counseling, but not in a way that helped. It became another tool. Another way to make Brooke process it, move on, stop punishing everyone, and stop bringing darkness into the house. Troy stayed. Brooke became the problem. By the time she was 18, she was counting the days until she could leave Raleigh. I sat on the floor beside my bed while she talked. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. I asked, did Mason know? Brooke paused. He knows enough. That answer hurt more than yes. Because yes would have given me one clean thing to react to. One clean betrayal. One clean line. He knows enough meant years of minimizing. Years of partial truths. Years of choosing not to ask the next question. I said, he let Stella around him. Brooke said, I'm sorry. That broke me. Because she was the one apologizing. She was the one who had been failed as a child, blamed as a teenager, pushed out as an adult, and she was apologizing to me. When Mason came home that evening, I was waiting in the kitchen. Stella was at Paige's apartment in Charleston by then. I had called Paige after talking to Brooke and asked if she could take Stella for the night. Paige didn't ask 1,000 questions. She just said, bring her. I drove 4 hours with Stella singing in the back seat while I gripped the steering wheel so hard my fingers hurt. I told her we were having a girls' sleepover with Paige. She was thrilled. I spent the whole drive trying not to cry. Then I drove back the next morning because I needed to look Mason in the face. He walked into the kitchen and froze when he saw me sitting there with no dinner started, no TV on, no pretending. I said, tell me what happened with Brooke and Troy. All the color drained from his face. He said, what? I said, don't make me ask again. He put his keys down slowly. Who told you something? That's your first question? He rubbed the back of his neck. Leah, whatever Brooke said, you need to understand she has always had a complicated relationship with this family. I almost laughed. It came out like a choke. There it is. He said, I'm not saying she lied. Then what are you saying? I'm saying it was years ago. I stood up. He flinched, and that made me even angrier. Years ago? That's your defense. I was a kid too. You're not a kid now. His eyes filled with tears, but I didn't soften. Not yet. He said, I didn't know everything. You knew enough. He looked at me then, and I saw that he recognized Brooke's words. I said, you knew enough, and you let him hold our daughter. You let him sit next to her at dinner. You let him give her cookies and tell her to keep secrets. Mason shook his head. No, don't say it like that. How should I say it? He wouldn't hurt Stella. You don't know that. I do. No, Mason. You hope that? He pressed his palms against the counter and bowed his head. For the first time since I had known him, he looked small. He said Diana told them it had been handled. That Troy got help. That Brooke exaggerated when she was angry. That bringing it up would only reopen pain. That family didn't abandon family. That everyone had moved on. I said, Brooke didn't move on. She moved away. He started crying then. Actual tears. He said, you don't understand what it was like growing up in that house. And maybe I didn't. Maybe I didn't understand what it was like to be raised by a woman who could turn silence into a weapon. Maybe I didn't understand what it was like to be told your whole childhood that peace was more important than truth. Maybe Mason had been trained to look away before he was old enough to know he was doing it. But he was old enough now. He was old enough when Stella was born. He was old enough every time I said Troy made me uncomfortable. He was old enough when our daughter came home repeating a line no child should ever hear from a grown man. I said, I can have compassion for the boy you were. But I am furious at the father you chose to be. He covered his face. I went to Charleston that night. I packed a bag for myself and a bigger one for Stella. I didn't ask Mason's permission. I didn't tell Diana. I left a note on the counter that said, we are safe. Do not come after us. Paige opened her apartment door before I even knocked. She took one look at me and pulled me inside. Stella ran to her couch like this was some fun adventure. Paige put on a movie, handed her a blanket, and then took me into the kitchen. I told her everything in pieces. Not cleanly. Not dramatically. Just these broken bits of sentences. Stella. Cookies. Diana. Brooke. Mason knew enough. Paige didn't interrupt. She just stood there with her arms crossed, jaw tight, eyes wet. When I finished, she said, you're not going back until you know what you're walking into. For a week, I stayed there. Mason called. I ignored the first few. Then I answered one and put him on speaker while Paige sat across from me. He sounded destroyed. He said he loved me. He said he loved Stella. He said he would never knowingly put her in danger. I said, you did put her in danger. Whether you meant to or not. He said, what do you want me to do? I said, tell your family Troy is not allowed near our daughter. He went quiet. That silence told me how much power Diana still had. I said, Mason. He said, my mom will lose her mind. I said, then let her. He said, it'll blow everything up. I said, everything was already rotten. You just liked the wallpaper. He didn't answer. After we hung up, I stared at my phone and realized something that made me feel cold all over. There were other kids in that family. Natalie had 2 little boys. Amber had a daughter close to Stella's age. Caleb's girlfriend brought her niece around sometimes. There were kids running through Diana's yard at every gathering while the adults drank lemonade and talked about work and pretended Troy was just awkward. I tried to sit with it. I tried to tell myself it wasn't my place. Brooke's story belonged to Brooke. Not me. Not Mason. Not Diana. Not the entire family group chat. But Stella's safety belonged to me. And those other parents deserved to know enough to make their own choices. So I did the thing that everyone is still fighting about. I wrote a message. I typed it 15 different ways before sending it. I deleted anything emotional. I deleted anything that sounded like an accusation I couldn't personally prove. I deleted every detail that belonged to Brooke. In the end, I sent this. I need to say this as calmly as I can. I recently learned that Troy has a history of inappropriate behavior toward a younger family member, and that it was minimized inside the family. Because of something Stella repeated after the barbecue, Mason and I are no longer allowing Troy around her. I am not sharing details that are not mine, but if you have children around him, please ask direct questions before deciding what is safe for your family. Then I hit send. For about 30 seconds, nothing happened. Then my phone exploded. Diana called first. I didn't answer. Then Caleb texted, what the hell is wrong with you? Amber wrote in the group chat, are you seriously accusing Troy of something disgusting with no proof? Natalie texted me privately, call me when you can. Wendy, Troy's mother, sent one sentence, you are evil. Then Troy called from a number I didn't recognize. I stared at the screen until it stopped ringing. He left a voicemail. I didn't listen to it. I sent it to Mason and told him if Troy contacted me again, I would document it. Mason called 2 minutes later. His voice was shaking. What did you do? I said, I warned the parents. You had no right. I had every right to protect my daughter. You made it sound like he's some kind of monster. I said exactly what I know. You humiliated my family. I snapped. No, Mason. Your family humiliated Brooke when she was 12. Your family humiliated me when I trusted them with my child. Your family humiliated itself by protecting an adult man's comfort over children's safety. He went quiet. Then he said, my mom is destroyed. And I said something I still don't regret. Good. Maybe she should be. That was the first time I really understood that my marriage might not survive this. Not because I wanted to leave. Because Mason still thought the disaster was the truth coming out, not the reason it had to. The next few days were ugly. Diana wrote me a long message about forgiveness. She said Troy had spent years rebuilding himself. She said I didn't understand trauma. She said Brooke had always been unstable and jealous of the attention Troy received after his father left. She said I had turned the family against an innocent man. I blocked her. Caleb said I should have gone to him first because he was the reasonable one. This was the same man who sat in Diana's garage with Mason while our daughter was outside near Troy, so I didn't have much patience for his version of reasonable. Amber posted something online about people weaponizing motherhood for attention. She didn't name me, but everyone knew. Then Natalie called. Her voice was low, like she was hiding in a bathroom. She said, I need to ask you something, and I need you not to sugarcoat it. I said, okay. She said, would you let Stella be alone with him? I said no. She started crying. Not loudly. Just quietly, like she had been holding her breath for days. She said, I always thought something was off. I hated when he played with my boys. But Diana made me feel awful for being weird about it. That sentence made me sit down. Because that was how Diana controlled everyone. She didn't need to prove Troy was safe. She just made you feel cruel for wondering if he wasn't. Later that night, Brooke called. I was sitting on Paige's balcony wrapped in a blanket, watching cars pass below, when her name lit up my screen. I answered, terrified she would hate me. She didn't speak at first. Then she said, Diana called me. I closed my eyes. I'm sorry. She told me you dragged my pain into the street. My throat tightened. I tried not to give details. I know. I waited. Brooke breathed in shakily. Then she said, thank you. I started crying so fast I couldn't stop it. She said nobody had ever defended her without making her prove every detail first. Nobody had ever looked at the family and said, this was wrong, without also asking her to be quiet for someone else's sake. She said, I used to think I was the problem. That sentence stayed in my chest like a stone. When I finally went back to Raleigh, Mason was waiting in the driveway. He looked exhausted. Unshaved. Eyes red. He had cleaned the house, which almost made me laugh because of course he had. Men will vacuum when their lives are falling apart because it's easier than facing the mess they made. Stella ran inside to get her stuffed animals. Mason and I stood by the car. He said, I told my mom Troy can't be around Stella. I said, and she said you poisoned me. I nodded. He swallowed. I also told her I should have listened to you. That was the first thing he had said in days that sounded like a husband instead of Diana's son. I wanted it to fix everything. It didn't. We started counseling the next week with Faith. The first session was awful. Mason kept saying he didn't know how to separate what he believed from what he was taught to believe. He said every time he tried to be angry at Diana, he felt like he was betraying his mother. He said he hated himself for not taking me seriously sooner. I told him I hated that I had to become the villain before he became a father. Faith didn't let him hide behind childhood. She said, understanding why you froze is not the same as excusing what happened after. Mason cried again. This time, I didn't comfort him. That probably sounds cold. Maybe it was. But I had spent years soothing that family's feelings. I had moved away from hugs politely. I had swallowed discomfort at dinners. I had let Diana make me feel dramatic for trusting my instincts. I had no softness left for grown adults who needed children to be quiet so they could feel peaceful. A month has passed now. Diana has not seen Stella without me present. Honestly, she has only seen her once, at a park, for 40 minutes. She cried the whole time, not because she asked how Stella was, but because she said she couldn't believe it had come to this. I told her it came to this when you told a child to bury the truth. She left early. Troy is not allowed near my daughter. That is not up for debate. Mason knows if he breaks that boundary once, I'm gone. Not threatening. Not dramatic. Gone. Natalie and her husband stopped bringing their kids to Diana's house. Amber still thinks I'm a monster, but even she admitted in a message to Mason that she doesn't want her daughter alone with Troy until things calm down. Which is funny, because apparently I'm evil, but not evil enough to ignore. Caleb has gone quiet. Wendy still sends messages from new numbers. I block everyone. Brooke came to visit last weekend. She drove up from Savannah and arrived with flowers she said were not a peace offering because you didn't do anything wrong. Stella liked her immediately. They colored at the kitchen table while I made tea. At one point, Stella asked why Aunt Brooke looked sad. Brooke smiled and said, "Sometimes grown-ups remember old things." Stella nodded like that made perfect sense and handed her a pink crayon. I had to turn away because I felt myself breaking. Later, after Stella went to bed, Brooke and I sat in the kitchen. The house was quiet. Mason was in the living room pretending not to listen. Brooke looked around and said, "This feels weird." I asked, "What does?" She said, "Being in a family kitchen and not feeling like I have to watch every word." I didn't know what to say. She wiped her face quickly, embarrassed, and said, "I used to think I ruined everything by speaking up. Now I think maybe I just told the truth too early for people who wanted lies." That was the first time I felt something close to peace. Not victory. Just the small, steady calm. Like maybe the whole family didn't have to heal for one person to stop bleeding. Mason and I are still together, but I won't pretend we're fine. We sleep in the same bed again, but there is distance between us that love alone can't close. He is trying. I can see that. He reads parenting articles now. He corrects Diana when she tries to twist things. He apologized to Brooke without asking her to make him feel better. But sometimes I look at him and remember the pause. That tiny pause when I asked how he knew Troy wasn't dangerous. That pause was where my old marriage ended. Whatever we build now has to be something different. Maybe stronger. Maybe not. I don't regret protecting Stella. I don't regret warning the other parents. I don't regret making Diana uncomfortable after she spent decades making everyone else carry her silence. But I do wonder about Brooke. Because the truth I used to protect my daughter started with her pain. And even though she thanked me, I still lie awake sometimes wondering if I had the right to touch a wound that wasn't mine. So I need to ask, was I right to warn the family before something worse happened, or did I cross a line by exposing an old secret that the person it happened to had spent years keeping quiet?